Every object that has mass has gravity. The chair you're sitting in is pulling on you with its gravity. The table you're sitting in front of, the computer, the person sitting next to you, they all have gravity. Even in space, every object that has mass has gravity. So, which objects in space exert their gravitational forces on the Earth? The answer is everything that is out there exerts some sort of gravitational force on the Earth. Which objects in space exert the most gravitational force on the Earth? What do you think? The answer is the sun and the moon. Why? Why do these objects exert the most gravitational force on the Earth? Because of its proximity. The moon and the sun are the two closest objects to the Earth, and they exert their gravity mostly because of that. The sun also exerts a lot of gravity because of its size. Surprisingly, the moon exerts more gravity on on the Earth than the sun does, despite the size of the sun. So, what? Why are we talking about this? Because of the tides. The moon and the sun together, their gravitational pull in combination with the Earth's rotation on its axis create tides. So we're going to talk today about high tides and low tides and special tides that occur when the sun and the moon and the Earth are all lined up in special positions, in certain positions. So this is an example of the tides at Pleasure Pier in Galveston in early September of this year. And you can see that there are 2 low tides and 2 high tides most days. We'll talk about why. Okay, here's how the moon causes tides. The moon is smaller than the Earth, obviously, but it's got a lot of mass still. It's a big object, and it still has a lot of mass. So therefore, it has a lot of gravitational pull. The moon is pulling on the Earth itself, and it is also pulling on the water. The water that's on the surface of the Earth is pretty easily moved by the gravity of the moon. And so when the Earth spins, and about every 25 hours, the Earth has spun around and the moon has gone back to the same place it was about 25 hours ago, then the moon exerts the same kind of pull on the Earth and the water that's on the surface of the Earth. So what you have is 2 high tides and 2 low tides every day because the Earth is spinning and the moon is going around the Earth. So when you have a high tide, the water is pulled by gravity of the moon, and the Earth is also pulled by gravity. So you have a high tide on one side of the Earth and a high tide on the other side of the Earth. Opposite those, you have low tides. So we'll look at those in a little bit more detail. Okay, there are 2 special tides that happen when the Earth and the sun and the moon are in alignment. So either when the moon is over here on the far side of the Earth, but directly in line with the sun, draw a straight line there, which I will do. You can draw a straight line from the sun, except I can't draw a straight line on my map, all the way through to the moon, and those are in alignment. So it happens when the moon is here or when the moon is here. Okay? What phase of the moon is this over here? This is when the moon is on the opposite side of the Earth from the sun. So this is a full moon phase. So we have a spring tide when the moon is in full moon phase, And what phase of the moon is this? This is the new moon phase. We can't see the sun's light reflected on the surface of the moon here. So from Earth, we're looking at the new moon phase. So when we're in a new moon phase or a full moon phase, we have a higher high tide, about 20% higher, and that is called a spring tide. That's when the sun's gravity and the moon's gravity are both working together to pull on the water of the Earth. At the other times of the moon cycle, over here at the first quarter, or over here at the third quarter, we have a 90-degree angle, basically, between the moon and the sun and their pull on the Earth and on the Earth's water. The moon has more influence over the sun because it's closer, and so the high tide is over here, and the low tide is here and here. This is called a neap tide. This is when the sun and the moon are basically fighting against one another to pull on the water of the Earth. Despite the fact that the moon is a lot smaller, it wins because it's a lot closer. And so it pulls the high tide in its direction, whether the moon is in first quarter or last quarter. And then the low tides are in line with the sun. So that is called a neap tide. So just to review, we have a neap tide where the sun and the moon are at right angles to each other, at a 90-degree angle to one another. The moon wins the fight, and that's called a neap tide. You have the tides are closer to the moon. The high tides are closer to the moon. The low tides are closer to the sun, or on the sun side. We have a spring tide where the sun and the moon and the Earth are all in alignment, and that occurs during the new moon and the full moon phases of the moon. Those are called spring tides, and those are higher high tides and lower low tides as well. I hope this has helped you understand a little bit more about how the moon and the sun work together to cause tides.